button.
Okay, I would just like to point out how absolutely perfect we've created the green screen.
Yeah,
It's
wow.
seamless.
Yeah.
It's like you could never tell that there's a green screen
Every
behind us.
time we get behind the microphones in this room together, it's usually we've just plugged something in for the first time.
And we fix one problem and then we create two more.
Yes.
That's the way we do it here at Paloma Media. So thanks for joining us in a little lunchtime conversation. Matt, you haven't been here in a couple of weeks. I'm glad to have you back. It's Matt Welch.
It's been a month actually.
No way.
I mean, I've been here.
Well, you've been here, but we haven't been in the studio. But we're here now, and per usual, we're going to talk about some stuff that's been that we've been talking about in private.
We're not going to talk about Jesse Singleton.
We're not, but
sorry to create any sense of expectation on
yeah.
that. But the thing that's fascinating me about that whole kerfuffle and a bunch of other things besides, including things that we've talked about whenever we've been in this room plugging stuff in, is the concept of consequences and lack thereof for people, including a kind of ridiculous number of journalists or self-described journalists who make shit up or who get things wrong or make an accusation against another person who isn't true. And I think it's kind of interesting, and I want to even get a little bit of your personal experience with that, because I think that there's something newish about that. And I'll tee it up by this way, and I guess I have to talk a little about Jesse Singleton. So today there's a baseball writer, cranky guy who I've known, and he's known me for 20 years. We probably never met, named Craig Calcaterra. Used to be a lawyer, has written for NBC. I think he has a newsletter now, actually on Substack. And he wrote a cranky little thing about our friends Katie Herzog, Jesse Single, today, in which he had said that they're both, or at least Jesse was on Substack Pro, meaning he was getting paid by Substack to write, which turns out not to be true.
Not be true.
And he also characterized them in certain ways as well. Jesse, as he always does, immediately responds in public saying, "I hope you make this correction to this thing that you're saying about me." I followed Craig for a long time. He probably hates my politics. I probably don't like his a lot. But one reason why I continue to follow Craig is that I knew he would correct it.
Oh.
Because he's a guy who comes from the baseball sabermetrics world, and there's a certain kind of value on truth in all of that. You can't just be a bullshitter.
If you're a numbers person, you can't be a bullshitter because numbers don't lie.
And you're not gonna stay long in that particular community.
Right.
You'll get drummed out. And Craig issued a correction or revision soon thereafter. And I'm sure there's other problems between all of them. But I say this because that is the exception, actually, and not the rule. To people who either come at Jesse or who come at people that we've talked to before, Donald McNeil and other people. And more importantly, it's the inverse of this. So there are people who write about media critics, journalists and media critics who write about journalistic controversies, especially perceived victims of controversies, Taylor Lorenz, the New York Times being chief among them. Mm-hmm. Margaret Sullivan of the Washington Post wrote recently an entire column about how awful it is that Taylor Lorenz is getting a bunch of terrible criticism, misogynistic criticism and elsewise, and being targeted by Tucker Carlson night after night. Wrote an entire column on that without once mentioning stuff that Taylor Lorenz got wrong, accusations that she made that were false. And that, to my knowledge, never immediately, quickly, calcitarianly got corrected. And I'm kind of wondering about that, where, how we got to a place where there are not kind of consequences. I'm looking not for someone to get fired at all. I'm looking for someone to get criticized for being a journalist and making false accusations against people.
And having their work itself be criticized, not having people immediately jump back and say, well, the criticism was coming because she was a woman. The criticism was coming because, this person was X. Yeah, I mean, I think Taylor Lorenz got ridden pretty hard after she's been doing this a while. But let's take the most recent controversy. She went into Clubhouse where they haven't been so super happy to have her there because she's constantly sort of eavesdropping, and she went in and she misreported. It was on the GameStop controversy, and she misreported that she heard Mark Andreessen using the word retard, which is apparently what the GameStop people call each other when they're trading stuff on whatever. I'm not super up on how all that stuff works. Well, it turns out not only was it not Andreessen who said it, but it was a word that they use amongst themselves and it was not being used in a pejorative. So she kind of got ridden hard about it. Now, there was she or anybody else, as far as I know, at the time didn't come out and go, whoa, geez, got it wrong. Sorry about that. I'll do a better job moving forward.
She was defensive about it, like, well, still people heard the word, and communities
okay.
were no. There isn't a still. That's the thing. Like,
and everybody melts. They hear the word and they just melt into just like a pile of goo because we're so unbelievably sensitive now that nothing can be heard. Anyway, so what they came out, including Margaret Sullivan, so don't get me started on Sullivan. It's like, no, it's the communities that came out against her that are to blame. And do you know that female journalists are under attack constantly all the time? And there has to be like a society of female journalists that comes out and calls for people to treat us better. I'm like, I'm sorry. What?
Do you not get treated badly?
I do not get treated badly.
Really?
No. And in fact, I remember years ago at the LA Weekly, my editor, Tom Christie, Tom, yeah. He said to me, do you think that there are stories that you haven't gotten because you're a woman? And I'm like, well, I kind of wouldn't know the answer to that, right? Because I'm not in charge of all stories assigned by everybody. But I can tell you, I think there are stories that I've gotten because I am a woman, because somehow they felt that people were going to talk to me instead, or the way that I talk to people or listen to people. Anyway, when I read that Sullivan piece, I was like, you could have taken out female journalist and put any other category of person in there that engages online, and it would have held the same water.
I am curious about
or not held the same water.
Not held the same water. I'm curious about there's one of these dumb little Twitter strings of you and other people, other women journalists tagging each other, and a lot of people who are in there of like people to follow and who are interesting and worthwhile, and of course everyone was. And a lot of those people there would be people that one would describe as not necessarily agreeing with, let's say, that Margaret Sullivan column, or the notion that women are preternaturally victims. And yet many of them have been victimized. I mean, you were victimized maybe not for womanness, but you were just on the receiving end. You were in the barrel because of Portland shenanigans and crap and bullshit accusations that people made without worrying about consequences for making false accusations. But other people there too. I'm thinking of Mary Catherine Hamm. My God, great journalist, conservative commentator, so she gets a lot of heat.
And funny as fuck.
A really funny person. She's suffered through some of the worst tragedies you could ever possibly imagine. Her poor husband, who I knew and was a sweet guy, Jake Brewer, was killed riding his bike a few years ago.
And she was pregnant with their second child.
Yeah, I mean, it gone through as bad as it can be. And there have been people, and I've seen this happen, and it's mostly more on the Twitter rando scale than actually credentialed journalists. But still, imagine you've been on the receiving end of this. And yet, does Mary Catherine Hamm walk around wearing a, I've gone through tragedy, handle me gently shirt on?
No.
Hell no.
No, but here's the thing. It's you take this, sure. Everybody gets a fucking death threat. Yes, death threats are bad. Nobody likes them, but really it's because they're coming from behind this anonymous scrim, and almost all the time it never happens. So just like put that to the side and get on with life, right? But the victimhood, what people who gain mileage and gain traction from the victimhood, they take the aggression, is aggress a word?
No,
whatever, it's a word now, whether it existed or not, and they take it and they dip their little hanky in blood, and they dip it and they dip it, and they pin it right here so that everybody can see, I'm a victim, you see? And now, not only do I get to claim whatever it is that I might want to claim later on, but I have a lot of people that respond to this. And, it makes people feel good to help other people. Oh my God, that happened to you. I want to help you. That's a very natural and human response. The problem is that it's been completely, I hate to use the word weaponized, but it has been. It's now like I am allowed to say anything I want to you to make you feel like you're the aggressor because I have the right to do it because I am a woman.
What I don't understand is, so like I'm thinking of a couple of past iterations of media cycles, right? Like in the early days of the post 9/11 blogging universe, for example, Dan Rather got into a whole bunch of trouble for a piece that CBS News ran trying to say that George W. Bush got out of the draft had something to do with,
Yeah.
a piece of paper and the kerning on the letter, whatever. The reporting didn't quite check out, even though it's very plausible as a narrative thing. Like, I don't doubt that George W. Bush, I'm a Bush over here. I don't really have to serve, right? That probably
It
happened.
happens.
But you've got to nail the story down shut. And he suffered reputational consequences, and the story was somewhat retracted. And even though a lot of people still sort of share it now, there was a sense that you can't successfully make stuff up or base a story on making stuff up. And that sense of consequences journalistically seems to, in my mind, to have been removed. Like the burden of proof is no longer on the serious accusation that you make on a person. And that's not a good direction for things to go in.
I think we kind of exploring this right now and something I'm working on. I think we have, there was journalism, there was the new journalism. I think we've probably also had the new journalism.
Yeah,
And now we have the new journalism, right?
Okay.
Which I think is about, and we've talked about this before. It's advocacy plus journalism, activism plus journalism. Like you have to be writing with a mission in mind. And when you have that mission in mind, then you can do certain things to other people because you're fighting for a larger cause, right? Whether that cause is, whether you say it's Black Lives Matter. I mean, I could get into the whole Portland thing and what they're doing over there. Or it's for women's rights or trans rights. So if you wind up not even actually reading Jesse Singal's incredibly important and work in the Atlantic about trans kids, which is so humane and scholarly and deep and compassionate. But instead, there's this like little kernel of something you think kind of doesn't really match your idea of, all trans children all the time should be believed and encouraged. I'm boiling that down. I'm sure maybe that's not the ideology, but that gives you enough credit and reason to destroy his life. Now, are you lying by misrepresenting what he wrote? Yes, but it's forgiven, you see, because the ends justify the means. Now, as far as I'm concerned, they never justify the means. Ever, ever, ever. So yes, you should be held to account. If somebody comes up and says, Jesse Singal is what are they calling him? I can't keep the turf and the this and the that.
Chaser.
A chaser. God, that sounds so like old school. Sounds like 1950s.
Chubby chaser. That's a little different.
Oh my God, a friend of mine
Oh.
told me she found under the bed once her husband's like chubby chaser magazines.
Oh no.
Yeah, she wasn't chubby either. I was like,
Well.
we could fix that, right? Yeah, but now people sometimes get into, and I certainly have myself. You get into these confrontations online where someone says, "Well, you said X," and it's like, well, actually, I never said X, but that doesn't matter because already 100,000 people believe that you said X. So it's not about people say, well, this person did that. I'm like, but what about when it's a lie? What about when the accusation is a lie? And that seems to be something that people are happy to gloss over if the lie matches what they want accomplished.
Yeah, here's an example. I mean, the team membership in politics and tribal membership makes people stupid. I remember many, many times in the late 90s and basically through all of his life, the late Justin Raimondo from antiwar.com, cranky libertarian, Pat Buchanan guy back in the day, very passionate about being anti-war, hated my guts, and thought that I was pro-war and neoconservative and stuff. I would see a lot of people who I know and like and I've worked with give him a big pass on stuff because his heart was in the right place about this one big question that would matter to them. That's a yes. And I actually appreciated and conversed and had a relationship with Justin over time and was sad to see him leave this mortal coil. But at the same time, as I stressed, if he's making stuff up, and he made up that I supported the Iraq War and that I supported the he didn't say that I didn't support the Afghanistan War. I did at the time, but that I supported the Iraq War and I did X, Y, and Z, and I was a neocon. Like easily disprovable lies, and it wasn't just about like where I was on an issue, but just like tangible accusations about my conduct and my writing were not true. Someone who's on your team who is saying stuff that isn't true is not your friend. Is not your friend, or at least your friendship should be, hey, dude, heart's in the right place, but you got to clean that up. Because if you don't clean that up, it's going to discredit your own work. It's going to, needlessly alienate or do this and that and the other. But like, we are in the truthing business, and when we get shit wrong, the whole point is to correct it in a crestfallen way as soon as humanly possible, and learn from your mistakes and move on. And I think right now there's a whole kind of wave of journalism that's going more in the direction of like, if your heart's in the right place, then it's okay to color a bit outside the lines. And this isn't like some kind of like nostalgia for the grand era of objectivity that didn't exist.
No, because there's always been, what is it called? Yellow journalism, or people that are like, they're hiding their true objective. But I mean, I didn't grow up that way. I didn't grow up that like I had a point that I had an objective I was supposed to meet. I mean, that's absolutely illegitimate journalism, correct? I mean, 100%. You can't pre-decide the story and then say, well, I'll just fill in the lines here. I'll get my quotes. This is not journalism. This is that's PR, or it's errand boy shit that you've decided who you need to destroy. Sometimes, as far as I'm concerned, some of the journalism I've been seeing lately, it's like, oh well. Maybe we want to unseat this person. Maybe this person is in a position of power, and I don't think he should be, because either A, I want his job or her job, or I think he's the wrong age or the wrong color or the wrong political persuasion. So maybe we can drumbeat some shit and get this guy out of there. And that's exactly what happened with Donald McNeil. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that was never a fucking story. It was not a story. It was a mission. And here's the thing: it works. And that's a problem for people that care about not doing that, and people who care about ethical journalism. I didn't find it particularly ethical.
Yeah, I mean,
And it's also obviously it's symptomatic of some larger issues going on inside the New York Times.
Right, and it's also there's some value in placing context to it. But like even in that episode, it gets to the what is a terrible thing. The terrible thing was, in his case, that he used the N-word on a trip with high school students in Peru in 2019, and was insufficiently punished in a way that most people didn't hear about, were angry when they learned about it later, something like that. And also some kind of tertiary ideas that he was sort of a cranky old dude, which
he was.
Totally seems like he was. But in the process of that, people made flat statements, journalists, some of his colleagues, that he was racist, which is a grave accusation in American life, to just say someone's racist and not have the backing evidence except for that one anecdote that you have. And then also, as we discussed previously, when we got together behind the microphones testing out new equipment, in that process, Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is in very good standing at that newspaper, made the absolutely ridiculous assertion that she did something on Twitter accidentally, and the New York Times PR shop backed her up. The thing is, this should not be an easily survivable thing to do, to make stuff up. It shouldn't be. There shouldn't. It's not like survival is too strong of a word, but like there should be some sanction. There should be some sense of apology, a quick correction, and then you move on, and then you sort of buy more credibility for later. There isn't. And so people are revealing themselves, and institutions are revealing themselves on a day-to-day basis by what they mobilize everyone to get excited about and what they do not. And regardless of your ideological lean as an institution, as a journalist or whatever, like you got to have that basic thing in there. You can't make stuff up. You can't just say, oh, that was the intern who took over my Twitter account 10 years ago and said all those nasty things, and I'm getting an investigation to look at it immediately. No, it's BS. Everyone knows it's BS, and you should have a difficult time explaining yourself through that. Don't want anyone to get fired unless they absolutely deserve to get fired, but I do want there to be a sense of a limiting factor on how freely, especially journalists, can act in making accusations without any evidence.
So let's go back a little way. Let's remember like Jason Blair, right, or Stephen Glass, who came in and were fabulous, and especially Glass was really good at being a
It's a
fabulous.
great movie if you haven't seen.
Oh my God,
Shattered
Shattered Glass,
So
great,
good.
great, great flick. You know, when they were revealed to be fabulous, they were dispatched with. And you know, I have no idea actually what happened with Jason Blair, but I know Glass has gone on to, I think he
Went to law school for a while.
but couldn't practice law. They wouldn't let him wouldn't let him, I don't know, take the bar or pass the bar or whatever it is because of,
pretty severe.
it is past transgressions. But now I think he has like some sort of like shop where he, I don't mean like a retail shop, like a shop where he works with people and I don't know, helps them with their writing. Someone told me the other day he's fabulously wealthy and has done okay. Okay. So there were consequences for that. I mean, that was sort of wholesale making up of stuff. But now, because I think it's twofold. It's like, well, I have an objective with this story, whether it's a Taylor Lorenz, I want to get these, you know, white old tech guys, I want to unseat them and they should be losing power. Doesn't everybody agree? They should be losing some power, and I've got an objective here, and so I'm on the good team. And so if she messes things up, it's like, well, it was in service to something good, let's just move on. And it's also become the case that I think management has become, they've either become afraid of their crew and their, you know, waving of the bloody cloth that like I'm allowed, you know, if you tell me I'm not allowed to do this stuff, well, you're also in the bad camp. Or they've created the new shops where it's like that's the way journalism is practiced now. It's not practice where you're doing your best to try to explain the story. You're on a mission. And you sent me something yesterday which put me in mind. We've been talking about all this stuff for a couple of years, but you sent me the link to all the Kobe Bryant murals, which was pretty amazing. So, as a matter of fact, right around the corner from here, I live in Chinatown. There appeared like really quickly after Kobe and his daughter Gianna were killed in the crash, an absolutely beautiful, beautiful mural of them. It's still there. And it's beautiful, and nobody messes with it. And if we can go back and remember what happened, the spontaneous outpouring of emotion for their deaths was incredible. I mean, I was going to say at the Coliseum, it's not the Coliseum, it's the Staples Center in LA now, and around the world, art and music and people baking cakes in the shape of, you know, Kobe and Gianna, and people writing about it. I mean, it was spontaneous, right? I mean, you could not hold in what you were feeling. And at the same time, there were some people online, I'm thinking of someone specifically, who took this moment and said, I will now take this moment and grab some of the sunshine for myself and make you realize what a fucking piece of shit Kobe Bryant was. And I thought, how does that opportunism even exist? Like, what sort of smallness of heart inspires someone to do that?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that there's always the obituary contrarianism. Like, you know, we're not allowed to say terrible things about the person who died. Well, he's terrible. That's always there. But in this specific case, there's certain people who will always go when there's somebody in the news or someone dies or whatever, and insert themselves into the story. And definitely was the case there. I want to get to a question from Charlie Cowens over here.
Hi, Charlie.
And the other one, Messenger of Death, is that what it says? I tried to correct the volume a little bit. We'll see if it works. Maybe it'll turn on Nancy up as well, but
or not.
Yeah, too loud. Why have no anonymous sources been revealed after stories based on them turn out completely wrong? It's a good question. It came up recently. I forget the exact. It was the transcript of the phone call, one of the two phone calls that Donald Trump made pressuring officials in Georgia. I have never understood that. I've always felt like if an anonymous source tells you something that is false, especially if they work in government, they lose all privileges at that moment.
Yep.
And I further have always been of the belief, and when I have been in managing situations, editing situations, I've tried to enforce that when you use an anonymous source, you should have a parenthetical clause or a comma clause saying who wished to remain anonymous because of X reason. If you do that, half the anonymous sources go away. Not because you're putting them on the spot, but because you're putting the journalist on the spot. So many anonymous sources are journalists being lazy and talking to their friend who they know works in the Department of Agriculture, and like sort of plug in and confirm whatever sort of biased thesis that they might have in the story, and that's about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so naive. Like I would never have assumed. I would never even think to do that. Oh, let me just call my friend. Let me call my brother and get him to just say, "Oh yeah, Nancy, I think blah blah blah."
Yeah.
Oh my God! Wow, all these tips you're giving me, Matt.
Do yourself a favor. Go into the latest Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, whatever, front page, and try to find an anonymous source. You will see some anonymous sources who completely will understand why that they're anonymous because they're talking smack about a coworker or they're talking out of turn in sort of government PR, they're leaking. But even then, I think that if you give a sense of their motivation for being anonymous, then suddenly it directionalizes the story in a way that would be a lot more honest. If we knew Mark Felt's motivation as Deep Throat way back in the day, Woodward and Bernstein, we might have thought about that story. We might have mythologized that character, literally mythologized that character in a much different way rather than, oh, there was a kind of personal ambition, there was some turf wars, some jealousy. That always happens. And in its absence, and a lot of times people don't come close to saying that, they just get a tip and throw it out there, which also happened in the Don McNeil Daily Beast story. It's like, why did you get that? How did you get that information?
Right. Yeah. Who slipped you that from
And
the New York Times and why? And well, I think we know why. I mean, it's pretty obvious why. I mean, the 150 at the Times are like, well, we just felt it was very important. It was very wrong that he said this, and we were personally hurt, and we need personal apologies for each of us, and we need it reinvestigated. Well, but then when they're like, well, we didn't want him fired. It's like, oh, you didn't? Then like, what? Then what was all this for? Why did someone there slip this information anonymously to the Daily Beast? Like, then what was the point?
And to answer the question further, for people to come out and burn the source who burned them, or like let's say to do exactly how you're asking it. In some cases, it would be, I think, revealed that there kind of wasn't a source. I don't want to say that there's pure fabulousness going on, but this is especially in terms of when you hear, sources confirmed what the New York Times had yesterday. And Glenn Greenwald had a long piece on his Substack about that the other day, which actually plays into that George phone call thing. A whole bunch of different news organizations independently confirmed that this was the quote, and it turns out that wasn't the quote. So what was that independent confirmation? If you are specific about unraveling it, you might be specific about saying that the initial claim about the confirmation was a little fudgy. And so you'd have to show that, and journalists don't want to show their work.
Well, I spoke to you about this the other day. I did a clubhouse with Lizzie Wolf from Reason, and someone asked the question. They said, because we were talking about Cuomo, and we were talking, there was the first accuser, then the second, then the third, and someone said, well, as a journalist, when you hear this is a story, do you like immediately go out and start seeking to find other people to confirm this? Like, there's another woman, and there's another woman, and I was like, actually, I seek disconfirmation. I have to look at the first person and what she said and try to figure out, like, does this make sense? And he's like, well, but if there are other people, I'm like, yeah, but you have to understand the reason why other people come forward. Sometimes it's super legit, and they were like scared in the past, or they feel like now is their moment. But let me tell you, and Matt, I think will back me up here, plenty of people tell you stories for their own reasons. Sometimes those stories are not true. Sometimes it's there because there's a movement now, and I want to be part of that movement. Or now it's time for me to get a little bit of sunshine. Or, you know what? I had a fight with Cuomo's sister in 8th grade, and now it's my moment to get back. It's like you don't know why your sources are telling you things. So no, you do not seek to confirm the worst thing that you heard. You try to figure out why people are telling you things. And a lot of times you can't use these people that come to you, or you use them in the context of which you found why they're telling them to you, which
This recalls to mind a 2003 story that the LA Times published right before the recall election. We're going to have another one hopefully soon in California. The recall election of Gray Davis. There was a long story about Arnold Schwarzenegger and groping and acting really, really poorly with, I think it was like 17 women. And I bring this up because compared to so much journalism that we've seen over the last few years, it was a model, actually, compared to the way that Brett Kavanaugh was covered and like stories that were given credence that just really had no backing to them. The Times did a lot of very like in-depth interviews and contextual look at this stuff, and were roundly criticized at the time by the conservative blogosphere and a lot of media watchdogs at the time because it fell too soon before the recall election, and they smelled foul play or thought that it was the LA Times trying to weigh in. I defended them then, and I will defend them extra now, which is to say, when you have the story, you publish the story.
right,
And
regardless of what the timing is.
yeah,
That's how it goes.
like you can't war game the timing. The story, if we recall about it, Schwarzenegger apologized. He took credit, apologized, said it was a terrible thing, and later he became a huge critic of Donald Trump with the grab him by the pussy stuff came out, and suddenly Arnold Schwarzenegger had all this rectitude and said like Republicans can't vote for Trump. And yes, it was opportunistic. It also could be that Schwarzenegger himself had moved on. I would like to think so because I kind of like him as a person. But the journalistically, people gave them a lot of grief. They shouldn't. They went and interviewed people. They weren't like trying to get a number and have the number be the story. That's how a lot of this stuff is happening, including with Cuomo. Like, oh, there's so many women, it must all be true. I don't doubt that he's a creepy ass dude who like tries to get around the hot 25-year-old and ask her in bad questions about her taste in older men and maybe hug a little. I think all of that is probably true. I have no hard time believing that. But you got to do more than just like have the number keep expanding. You have to like drill down into the individual cases and ask yourself, is that fireable, resignable, impeachable behavior or not? And it's not as easy of a question as just adding another number, I think.
No, he was, I mean, it's so funny when I read Charlotte Bennett's account. I think you and I might have spoken about this. And the things that he was asking her, they're just so gross. And it sort of reminded me of like people of my dad's generation, like they're kind of like older and they are like not very virile anymore, but they're like, hi, hey, what do you think about older guys? And like literally like when I was 25, like asking me about my sex life, it's just like, ew, it's so gross. And if you don't think I see what you're doing here, because I mean, who knows? Maybe in the piece I wrote for Newsweek, I wrote a little opinion piece for them. It's just like, why didn't he just have the fucking stones to say, you know what? I'd like to date you. I mean, he could have said that. It would have been completely inappropriate, but he could have done that. And she could have said, dude, no. And like the end, right? Could that have been the end? Or would that still have been like, oh my God, can you believe he asked her to go out on a date?
Yeah, that would have been probably
okay. So it doesn't matter. You just can't be a gross dude. You can't ever show some appreciation. But so speaking of Newsweek, I'm going to be here later tonight doing another media with my editor from Newsweek, Batya.
You're going to stream that on the YouTube?
I'm going to stream it on the
Nice.
YouTubes with, I'm sure the tech will be even more glorious than it is right now. You can see no hotspots or shadows on our green screen.
I like that.
All right.
The halos. How we doing, Yael?
Yeah,
we doing good?
Are we good? Yael's going to be like, oh my God, why do I even know these people? But Batya had an incredible piece in Persuasion that ran on the 10th. And I clipped out a line here because I want to bring it up. And she said, what equal society silences people because of the group they belong to? No, that's not what I wanted to bring up here. In any case, you guys should join us later tonight. It's probably around 6:30 or 7. We're going to be talking about her piece and also just some stuff about, I don't know, victimhood seems to be a perennial thing now that gains traction and people use it. And it makes me, because most of it's illegitimate, as far as I'm concerned, it pisses me off every time. So I have more stuff to say about it.
And in general, Nancy has a big week coming up. that
I
we should
do.
all be part of and
Get ready.
consuming as much as possible. A huge feature from Reason is going to drop
Monday.
on Monday.
It's got a good name. The Dream of the 90s died in Portland.
Who came up with that?
Did you? I think it was actually Catherine.
I'm sure it's
Catherine Mangu Ward.
If it's
yeah,
good, it was
yeah.
Catherine. But there's that, and there's going to be a bunch of podcasting
Yep.
stuff that's happening,
Yep.
Twitter threads and whatnot.
Yeah, and I'm going to be trying to do something every night here from the studio. Maybe we'll have you back if you're good, Mr. Welch. We'll see. And I'm doing some taping today with some other people because the story's interesting. And actually, what's going on in Portland is pretty interesting right now. I actually wrote today. I think I'm going to have to go back because it's not dying down. Murders are up 2,000%.
That seems like a lot.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. It was as of last year in Portland, there was like one. I gotta go to my Twitter feed at Nancy Rom. I posted it, but they got rid of something called the Gun Reduction Violence Task Force because activists wanted that. They cut that program. Activists wanted $50 million cut from the police budget. They got this $115 million project, and so so you don't have cops dealing with this stuff or patrolling it. So kids are just killing each other, and these are not the activists, mind you. You know this, right? This has nothing to do with where they actually live. It has to do in communities where there's traditionally been gun violence and gang violence, and so they cut that out. So all the bloodshed is happening over there, while they're very fucking happily downtown still setting fire to the federal building. Anyway, it would have been nice to think that we had the season of what did you call them? The MAGA riots. I love that.
Yeah, right.
That was very good. Good. I like that coinage. But apparently, with the weather getting better, people are just gonna keep doing this. It's a small contingent, but man, they are continue to dominate the narrative. But let's see. Local governments are pushing back. The mayor just asked for money to give to the police department, which is right. So.
Who knew?
Anyway.
If you like this stuff, please I love your guys' audio setup. Crisp sound, says DA Sean.
Yay!
Awesome.
Finally.
Someone says something good about the tech we're trying to assemble. We're so close. We're so close to having this thing interesting. I mean, it's functional.
Yeah.
But like to know everything and anyways, it's very exciting. And thanks for those who have been encouraging the development.
And helping. Thank you.
Developing all this. You can help if you like any of this stuff if you're not already a subscriber to the Paloma NYC YouTube account, please do. That helps. That gives us capability to do all kinds of different things that's all fun and games. More Portland from the inside. Very good. Looks very serious and professional. That's right. It's extremely serious and professional.
That's us. Do subscribe. We're trying to hit some numbers so that we can expand. There's a rubric over there on YouTube, so we're creeping up there. So if you subscribe, and we're going to try and be throwing a whole bunch of content at you in the next couple of weeks. So have some fun, and you should definitely go over to Twitter. You can follow me at Nancy Rom, NancyRomm, and at Matt Welch, like it sounds. But if you go to mine, you'll see the song that Matt just recorded. It's just
top notch.
Fantastic. So
all right.
Okay.
Until next
guys.
time. A bientôt.
Bye.
Let's hit this.
Oh, and I got to hit the other thing with my terrible eyesight.
Don't watch while we're doing this.
No, this is not part of the
not happening.
stream.